the idea of what is home and how do we create a home, or how do we learn to live in harmony with the home that we have. So most of us, thinking about home as a sanctuary, we need and want a safe and secure place to come back to when life is challenging, or when we're overcome, or when we have a day filled with delight and celebration and where our energy reserves are spent. We want a place where we can go back to and what we call crash, or just to recharge our batteries. We spend a lot of time finding the right place, decorating it and making it comfortable, populating it with people, if we live with other people who can comfort us and to whom we can comfort. Or some of us choose to live alone. And some of us, of course, live with others due to family bonds or economic realities. And then some folks, like those who live at Hartford Street, have made a choice about dwelling in a conscious community, of a spirit-focused community. So those are all possibilities, and those are all home, all very different. So home is a secure place where I find my foundation, and where I can go back to, where I can rely on. Sharon Salzberg, in her new book, Real Change, talks about that one interpretation of the word dharma is that which we can rely on. So if we think of home as a basic concept of that place that we can rely on for safety and to recharge our batteries, that becomes a really life-affirming place for us. And then in Buddhism, of course, we have the concept of impermanence, that all things come and go, all things change. And the Buddha taught that, if we do not understand the truth of impermanence, we will suffer, continue to suffer, and we will likely make others suffer. So somehow we have to think of the concept of the importance of having a secure place in a home. I find myself once in a while referring to Michigan, where my family lives, as home. I'll be telling a story and I'll say, well, when I go home, and I have not lived in Michigan in 50 years, 50, and yet, and actually more than 50, but never mind. But it's still somehow, when I use the language, it's when I occasionally will say, go home. And of course, I have, at this point, no real resonance with Michigan, and the things that happened at that formative stage in my life are not my favorite teaching moments in life. And so I'm not sure where that language comes from. So what we do know is that during the last 11 months, most of us spent a lot more time in our residences alone, and practicing with the difference between solitude and isolation. And for some of us, in an alarming amount of shared time with loved ones and family and roommates. And we've all told the stories or heard the stories of people who said, I was newly married just before COVID started and shelter in place. And now I've had this wonderful opportunity to spend the last 11 months on a daily basis in direct contact with this loved one that I have just chosen, or these children that I birthed and am so proud of and delighted in. And for some, this was a joyous chance to reconnect and to share the crazy journey of 2020. And for others, it was, could be suffocating. And in either case, that was home. So this week, in the midst of thinking myself as somebody who lives alone and thinking about the definition of isolation and 11 months of, it's opened up a lot in terms of going for walks and walking with people at a social distance and stuff. But several months and many hours of the day, I was telling myself in my story of, oh, woe is me, telling myself about how alone I was and how isolated it could be in this house. And then I was preparing at that point to give a talk. And at that talk on Zoom, there were 65 people. And so at the end of the talk, I was just thinking that I teach at a university. So I had 3 classes this week, plus the 2 Zen opportunities. So sitting here, you are all welcomed into my home. And that means that this week, by quick calculation, there were 320 people in my home. And I do know that solitude and sacred space is important to me. And so I suddenly sat with the idea that, 320 of you came into my home and we shared our thoughts and ideas and our hearts with each other. And that's way too many people. It's way too many people. So what does that mean exactly? And overall, I think it's joyous and so forth. But I think we go back always, as we did with the story of the Buddha, to our childhood homes. So for many of us, that was a place of joy and comfort, maybe the smell of good food and family laughing and all that. And for a lot of others, we grew up in chaotic households, worried about when the next drama might unfold, when the alcoholic in our family might show up angry or might not show up at all. In some cases, the actual presence of violence or the fear of violence and abuse. Not if it would come, those things, but when they would come. And some of us with neglect and invisibility. So in thinking about our Buddhist tradition, we began a lifelong pattern of suffering. Those karmic seeds that were sown in those original homes could lead us to worry and hurt and isolation. And eventually those sort of experiences migrate into fear. And that fear migrates into just about every aspect of our life. Never feeling completely safe, sometimes with no confidence in the future. And we carry those feelings and the stories that we learned or that were taught to us and forced on us by others. And for some folks, it was the idea that what we were taught and how we lived in those early homes was something that needed a lot of healing. And then we found ourselves on the Buddha's path. And teachings that allowed for me, and I hope for many of you, a new connection to life and the possibility of healing to such a degree that we could have lives filled with peace and ease and connection to others. But that healing is difficult. And I was looking this week at a book by Paula Arai. It's called Bringing Zen Home. And it's actually the story of work with the Japanese women's rituals in Buddhism. But the book is, and it's beautiful for those reasons, and that would be enough. But there's so much in the book that's helpful. And I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs talking about using healing to get back to interrelatedness. Buddhism, says Paula, is an experiential tradition. It teaches that you must test a behavior or activity for yourself to see if it helps stop suffering. Nothing is taken on faith. Therefore, Buddhism, rather than a pragmatic undercurrent, has a rather pragmatic undercurrent running through it. Likewise, healing is a pragmatic experience. What works for one may not work for the other. Suffering arises out of a mistaken sense that a person is separate, alone, and supported. Healing, conversely, arises out of the sense of peace that does not shatter in the face of horrific events and delusional activities. Healing occurs when we have a bodily, heartfelt awareness that you are integral and to an all-encompassing network. So it's that connection between us that allows the healing. And it's the teachings of the Buddha that began that healing process for me, and I suspect for some of you. Paula says that if you can come to accept how you are in any moment, it frees up a huge amount of energy to move forward with the healing in your life. So for me, in the loving words of the Buddha, I did find a safe home. First of all, for me, my reaction to my early life was to move at about 100 miles an hour, 24 or 20 hours out of every day and 7 days out of every week. So when I got to Buddhism, and I found, first of all, the main practice was to sit quietly, that I didn't have to talk, I didn't have to prove myself, I didn't have to tell the best or the funniest story, and that importantly, no one else was going to talk during the main practice of Zazen. That even in that ultimate quiet, I found in the beginning I could feel judged. Was I sitting straight enough? Was I breathing deeply enough? And I came to realize in sitting Zazen that those harsh criticisms were coming from inside. They were stories that I had been taught and stories that I was bringing into this beautiful silent practice. And a teaching that we all learn is to study the self, is to forget the self, and to really be at peace with all beings. And so in Zazen, I found this wonderful home where I had things I didn't even know that I was missing and dreaming of. A place to be quiet, a place, as we did this morning for 30 minutes, to be with each other, in the complete opportunity to simply be caring for self and caring for others. So when we meditate, we sit still, and we feel our breath, and we enter the immediacy of being alive right now in this moment. And in this moment, we're all in meditation. So in this moment, we are just as safe as we could be. And of course, meditation is not some miracle cure. It doesn't make all the injuries of the past and all of the busyness of the present and all of our worries about the future in terms of health and economy and other things in our lives. But I often wonder, for me, if this practice, and I've spoken about this a few times before, to be here fully present in this moment and experience the possibilities that Zazen offers, is it really a little bit too much self-care and self-focus? Is it really a little bit too much of me coming out of the world in order to do this practice? And we sometimes refer, when we're talking, to the doing Zazen and then going into the real world. And how do we make sure that the real world includes Zazen? That practice is everything is practice and practice is everything. So I wonder about the teachings of the Buddha about no separate self. Am I sitting in meditation, creating a life different than what is, or creating a story, or creating a history? Am I ignoring the karmic seeds that were brought to me by my family and my growing up? Am I creating just a delusion, that during this half hour or this period of time for a practice period or for sesshin, am I creating a delusion of a world calmer or better somehow, more supportive than the actual world that we live in? So again, Dogen in the Jingo Koan says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by 10,000 things. And I'm reminded of an Irish blessing that adapted just slightly. It says, may I recognize in me the things in you that cause me suffering. May I understand, accept, and forgive those things in me and in you. And may that acceptance and forgiveness light the path that we can walk together hand in hand. So, of course, we're not walking anywhere hand in hand this year, but the idea is there. So I think that this opportunity to say, where is it we come to find nourishment and to find the peace and ease that we need to live day to day in a spiritual way, in a connected way. So here's another teaching that Dogen gave. Dogen says, enjoying the tranquility of nirvana and leaving behind all the noise and hubbub of the world. If you seek to be tranquil and quiet, liberated from the insistence of the defiling passions, at ease and content, then you should part company with confusion and bustle and dwell at ease in some solitary place. The person who dwells in quietude forsakes what those in the heavens so highly esteemed among themselves. Therefore, withdraw from those about you, as well as from other crowds, and in a place of solitude apart from them, reflect on the source of suffering and the eradication of suffering. Yeah. If you are one who enjoys the company of others, Dogen says, then you will take on the woes of their company. That is what I call distancing yourself from those about you. So I think it's really interesting to think about how we make a balance between being actively engaged in the world and coming home to the heart mind, home to the building that we live in, home to the people that we have gathered or that we have been gathered to in our lives that make us feel safe. And, by virtue of what we're experiencing today, that reminder that home doesn't have to be in one place. Home can include Germany and France and Canada and Italy and Oregon and wherever the rest of us are, all of these wonderful places. So, this concern about, are we creating just a delusion of a separate home, separate from the world? Pat O'Hara, the abbot at Village Zen Center and one of the co-leaders of Zen Peacemakers, says, if someone allows their inner essence to surface, that isn't delusion. It's quite the opposite, really. Knowing your true self is called enlightenment. So she says that the three marks of existence, of course, are dukkha, which is suffering, anicca, which is impermanence, and anatta, which is the sense of no separate self. And I think we sometimes get confused about that. What does this separate self mean? And so one of the ways that I work with that and that I think about it is that the root of attachment is the false belief in a separate self. because this is one of the most difficult teachings of the Buddhism. We say, that what's this teaching of no self? Well, I'm here, and I'm in my home, and you're in my home, and you're there. So there is a self. But it's the process of recognizing I think, the essential unreality of a separate self. So we're here, and this is me, and I'm sitting here, and I'm wearing this robe, which somebody in Japan sewed, and somebody delivered here. And I'm wearing rakasu, which I sewed, but with fabric that someone else produced, and someone else cut, and someone else marked, and someone else put the pins in for me so I wouldn't sew it upside down or backwards. So if we practice no separate self, we don't disappear. We don't disappear. The me, Steven Koshin, that has lived for almost 70 years, doesn't disappear. I've survived many things. The karmic seeds have been planted. And so the difference is that when I'm in fit spiritual condition, as I think I am pretty much today, I can realize that me experiencing this present moment is experiencing it with all of you, and I would not be experiencing it without any one of you. The teachings that I'm trying to verbalize and share with you came from someone else to me and from someone else to them. And if you hear anything that's useful or helpful to you, you'll probably share them with somebody else. And so we are completely interconnected. And so it's not that I don't exist or you don't exist. It is that beautiful gift of that we are all connected. And then that second teaching, the teaching of impermanence, that we're all connected to stuff that we don't know. As I mentioned, Sharon Salzberg's book, she talks about anything we thought we knew in February of 2020, we did not know, and we don't know. None of us could have imagined the things that have happened, the ways that we would suffer as a worldwide global community, the ways that some of us would learn and develop and grow different sorts of relationship and different sorts of bonds and different ways of being helpful with each other. And that some of us would learn the basic teachings of the Buddha as a way of surviving and thriving ourselves and in service and in connection with each other, living wholeheartedly with things exactly as they are. Living wholeheartedly with things exactly as they are. So in a reading that I was looking at yesterday from a woman named Barbara O'Brien, who's a Buddhist writer, she says, to say that self is unreal is not the same thing as saying you don't exist. You exist, but not in the way you think you do. The Buddha taught that the ultimate cause of our unhappiness, of our dissatisfaction with life, is the fact that we don't know who we are. We think I am something inside our skin, and that what's out there is everything else, I and other. But this, the Buddha said, is the terrible illusion that keeps us trapped in suffering. And then we cling to this because of our own insecurities and fears and unhappiness. Fully appreciating the unreality of the separate limited self is one of the descriptions of enlightenment. So we get this opportunity to say, who am I? And where do I come to find myself? And what do I find when I get to that place? Buddhist practice can help us letting go of the sense of separate self, letting go of the sense of other, and really coming back to ourselves. So one of those practices that we get to use is mindfulness. Mindfulness in Buddhist practice, Thich Nhat Hanh tells us, is more than just a form of meditation or more than just meditation. It's whole body mind awareness of the present moment. So Thich Nhat Hanh says, I define mindfulness as the practice of being fully present, alive, body and mind. Mindfulness is the energy that helps us to know what is going on in this present moment. So for me, what does that mean, like in this present moment? Well, for starters, in my own life, what it means is it's the opposite of ruminating and worrying and reliving past moments. And it's the relief from planning and over-planning and strategizing and then manipulating what's going to happen in the future. Mindfulness is really coming home to the present moment and to know that in this present moment, for this hour and a half that we're together on Saturdays at Hartford Street Zen Center, we are in safety. And it's not different than the rest of the world, that we're in safety because we choose to be in this practice together. and that there is the possibility that we can carry this with us as we go into the other parts of our lives, that this practice is all of life and all of life is practice. So Suzuki Roshi, our founder in our particular lineage, says that in Zazen, we say your mind should be concentrated on your breathing. But the way to keep your mind concentrated on your breathing is to forget about yourself and to just sit and feel your breathing. Come home to your breathing, home to your body, realizing that your body and its interconnectedness to all other bodies and very directly connected to the planet. So it's a constant balance, it seems to me, and a constant engaged Buddhist practice to find that balance between just thinking about my breathing. And at my age, especially when I meditate in the morning, I'm thinking about my breathing. And then I'm thinking about how it's not as deep as it used to be. And I'm thinking about I need to cough or sneeze or whatever it is I need to do. And then, of course, I go immediately to if I need to cough and sneeze, that must be COVID. And perhaps I'll be dead by the end of this meditation session. And so off and running goes the mind. And so the opportunity is, as Suzuki Roshi said, just let go of all of that. Know that your mind works that way. When it comes up, I have a mantra that I've told people here before that I use in meditation, which is just the two words, not now. So when those things come up in my meditation practice, I take a deep breath and say, not now, in my mind. And then that takes me back to the breathing. And it's a tool that I've used really successfully over the years. I think we spend a lot of time in distraction because it's easier to deal, for many of us, to deal with those distractions than to deal with uncertainty and the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen next with health and the economy and political stuff and social justice. And we want to be protected in a way from the unexpected. And so, we find ourselves with a certain groundlessness or uncertainty and insecurity. And so rather than dwell in that reality, many of us find distractions that we can use. And so I think that it's okay. I was thinking about social media when I thought about that today. And I was thinking, many of us make little vows to ourselves that we will not spend so much time going down the trails on Facebook or going through the rabbit holes when you start looking up at a certain topic and, suddenly it's 2 hours later. And instead of doing the work you needed to do or preparing the meal you needed to prepare, you're still looking up from one link to another link to another link, some absolutely either important or completely esoteric and useless, but interesting in the moment topic. Or we've gotten onto some video game or some sort of thing, and we're playing it for a very long time. Well, I think rather than make a vow or make an annual, what do they call it, New Year's resolution that we're going to spend less time on media, I think it might be good to say, that a certain amount of distraction, a certain amount of that may be a protected space, a sacred space. It may be a little bit of a home away from all the chaos in the world and all the craziness that's going on, and that may be okay. So that rather than say I need to eliminate Facebook from my life, which some people may need to do, but rather than simply say that or say I'm never going to play games on the video again, it might make sense to say, why am I playing them? Why am I going down the rabbit holes? Why do I spend so much time in social media? Well, maybe it's because I need a bit of sacred space, a bit of safety from the chaos of the world. And so then you can use that to provide some peace, to calm your mind down, to find a centered place. And then you could focus on other more traditional practices, loving kindness for yourself and for others, figuring out why the world is so distressing to you, figuring out what are the things that you're afraid of, and are they real or are they stories from the past? What's in the present moment? And when we allow our minds to get calm, for some of us, it's not social media. For some of us, people know about me. It's daily walks near the ocean, very necessary, and some days completely habitual action, no matter what's going on. I last week was taking a delightful walk with a rain slicker and a hat, and it was frankly miserable, but it was time for my walk, and I needed to be by the ocean. So whatever it is, what we should look at is it in service to our sense of peace and ease? Is it preparing us? Does it arouse in us the proper heart-mind place to do zazen, to do loving kindness, to be connected with others. And if it does, I don't think we need to think about it so much as something we need to get rid of. I think we can think of it as a tool that we use to prepare ourselves to deal with the reality of the lives that we're living. So coming home, I think, can be thought of as arousing bodhicitta, arousing that mind of compassion, that mind of kindness, preparing us to be bodhisattvas in the world, to be of service to others and to ourselves. And I think that becomes really important. And I think what it does for me when I think of home and when I think of a place to practice and a place to be safe and a place to share the Dharma and a place to have 340 now, counting today, people welcomed into my home and my heart. And how wonderful it is to be welcomed into your homes. I think it's this wonderful opportunity to use our practice and the things that we've been taught. And I just want to close with a little poem that I found, a pledge that I found from Rachel Naomi Remen on the line. And I'm not sure where I found it, so it could be that whoever spoke here last week said it. I'm not, so you may be hearing it again. But Rachel, she's a physician, and she says, "May I escape the shame, inadequacy, and self-judgment and self-doubt that my training has taught me. May I trust that my love is as needed as my knowledge. May I remember in me the limitations of every person. May I be open to know my darkness and true to what light I have. May I be used as a blessing and a friend to all in life." And so it's just that beauty of that. I think she's talking about her medical practice training, but it certainly applies to our Buddhist practice as well, that our Buddhist practice can be forms and rituals and practices, and that's all good. Those things are all important, and we hand those from one another, warm hand to warm hand. And then we say, and what sort of home does that create for us to be safe in, for us to deal with the rigors of the world, for us to come to on the days and seasons when we are overwhelmed with joy, and to know that it's all impermanent. And so how do we help each other to live day to day, to live in the present moment? And it seems to me that as we redefine home, as home this week in my spiritual practice was home to 300 people being together. And it happened from my little window here to be in my home, but from each of your hearts and minds, it's in your home. And the degree to which we can feel safe and secure in the reality of our homes, in the reality of 2021, and in that reality to invite each other in, to sit together and to look at ourselves, to study ourselves, to let go of ourselves, and to be enlightened by 10,000 things, which is all of you and all that you bring. So thank you for creating home with me this morning and for welcoming me to your home. And you are always welcome in my home. Thank you. So I think we have a little bit of time. If anybody has a question or a thought or something that will be beneficial to all of us, or good joke, whatever you got, just unmute yourself and say hello. Richard, I think I see your hand, or maybe you're just adjusting your microphone.
I was just adjusting, thank you.
Stefan.
Thank you so much for your talk. It went directly straight into my heart. And for many years, I had those unhealthy practice of staying 11 months in Germany of a year and 1 month in San Francisco. And I called San Francisco my home. And during those 11 months, I dreamed myself away to San Francisco, and I didn't stay present in the moment. That was so much suffering. And in San Francisco, when I came to the Zen practice, that brought me back to the moment and back in reality. And then it began that I could say home to myself to those 11 months in Germany. Now it's such a wonderful experience to see, okay, I'm home here and I'm home in San Francisco, and the whole planet is my home. And when I travel to another country, it's like experiencing and discovering a new room in my house. And that's wonderful. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. And one of the ways, sometimes we need a little boost to get from thinking of where home is as the 1 month to thinking of home as broader than that. And one of the tools that Pat O'Hara teaches is that one of the ways to do that is to think, as you said, 11 months there and 1 month here, dreaming about the 1 month was causing me suffering. And if that's not motivation enough to change that behavior, if we realize that if you're suffering, so are other people around you, because we share that suffering with those in our daily lives. And so if we can't find the way to ease our own suffering, just because that's a noble path, that's a good thing to do. Sometimes the motivation can be, if I ease that 11-month suffering, I will ease the suffering of those who have the opportunity to encounter me during those 11 months. So that can be the motivation. Okay. Well, I think we're a quiet group this morning. So maybe all that needs to be said has been said. As Rumi said, if your words are not more important than silence, be quiet. Irvin Mio.
This is very off the cuff, Stephen, but I'm just throwing it out there. I haven't been thinking very much about the whole vaccination business.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been thinking about that very much until just the other day. I learned that some friends of mine managed to get vaccinated by some process that I still don't understand. And now I'm thinking about vaccination a lot, as though the spirit of envy has now entered into me, and now I'm obsessing about what buttons can I push so I can get vaccinated. So I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if you have anything to observe on this point, but
I think
it struck me as very odd that these people managed to get vaccinated. They don't even live in San Francisco, and they came in San Francisco and got vaccinated. It's like, what's going on? So that's not an excuse to become obsessed, but a certain preoccupation has now arisen.
Yes. Well, I think, I think one of the first tools is to have empathetic joy. Like, instead of
Of course.
they got vaccinated and I didn't, damn it. It's like, how wonderful that they got vaccinated. That,
Of course.
and our community safer. The fact that some people got vaccinated. And then I think the other thing that gets aroused is a sort of sense that many of us develop from childhood. It's like, if they got vaccinated and I didn't, of course I want to get vaccinated because that will make me healthier and safe. But then there's this sense, that nagging voice from maybe childhood or somewhere that says, I must have messed something up. Excuse me. I must have messed something up. They figured out to do this and I didn't. Why am I always missing out? Blah. Maybe I should have paid attention. So, that voice that starts running.
Right.
I think the opportunity to practice is to say, where am I right in the moment? I'm in a very safe building on Castro Street. Everybody's practicing very carefully. And so I'm safe. And so now I can spend some minutes a day, rather than torturing myself about why I didn't step back soon enough or cleverly enough, or whatever that negative voice is saying, to a place of saying, so how do I get on those lists? How do I figure out? And so when you talk to those people, to any of us, I was also vaccinated last week. So when you talk to any of us, to say, how'd you do it? With a fully open heart, that if you did it that way, maybe I can, or I'll find a way. Mm-hmm. I mentioned, Mio, before you got on today, I think, that yesterday they vaccinated 5,000 people at the Moscone Center, according to the news report. A little hard to imagine that's, that's my cynical side. It sounds more like a press release than a reality, but that's the capacity that they're claiming to have at the Moscone Center. So I think that's, it's, I think, partially starting with the joy for others that they got vaccinated and they're safe, and then moving to, so what can I learn from them in terms of not spending time wishing things were different than they are, that I didn't act fast enough or smart enough to use a word. But what can I learn from them about how to work in the systems of the person of my age and health status onto those lists.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting watching the alternation from relief on their part or for them and sense of doom for myself. It's like, this is where it starts,
Mm-hmm.
The zombie plague starts this way, a few people escape and then masses of us, are ground underneath. So anyway.
Yes, I was fairly certain that I caught COVID on BART on the way over to the place where I got from. So I was able to consciously reduce that anxiety.
Yes.
Any other thoughts for the day? Ron.
Yes, Mio, I shared with David a couple of links where you can get on waiting lists. So just ask your sweet mate, David.
Yeah. Thank you. I actually already did that. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nothing succeeds like success. Well,
and as one of our sisters mentioned earlier today, getting on those waiting lists can be a wonderful thing. We accept, good, we're now on the waiting list. It can also be an increased anxiety. It's like, damn, now I'm on the waiting list. What does that mean? Where am I up? Have I moved up the list? And so each step along that process, like most processes in life, can be relief and calmness for a few minutes, and then it's like, now what can I worry about? I can worry about, am I moving up fast enough on the list? So I think it's always a matter of being really consciously involved in working for peace and ease, and our practice allows that. Cheryl, did you have a question?
I don't. Thank you for the talk today. Okay. After the talk, we will be having the monthly Founders Memorial. So if you'd like to stay and join us for a short chanting and offerings here in Zendo, that will be happening just a few minutes after the talk ends.
The founder, for some of you who don't know, the founder is Isan Dorsey. That's our founder.
Well, I think it might be time for a chant and then the founder's ceremony.